Hey folks, Matt Dragonstone here. Before we start today's episode, I thought I'd do a little bit of self-promotion and direct you to my website, dragonstoneastrology.com. Book a tarot reading or an astrology reading, browse some of the finest astrological talismans available on the market today, buy one of my books, sign up for a short course, read my articles, and much, much more. Pretty much everything I do is kept on my website, dragonstoneastrology.com. So please check it out and let's get on with today's episode. Jaime Paul Lamb, thank you for joining us today on the Dragonstone Astrology Show, mate. How are you going?
I'm having a great morning so far. Thanks, Matt. Good talking to you. Glad I could come on.
Oh, mate, it's a great honor actually for me to have you on because I
Yeah.
was listening to Greg Kaminsky's podcast, Occult Personality, and that's where I first heard about you and heard about this amazing book, the Astrological Goetia, the 72 Keys to Angelic and Demonic Astrology. And listening to that conversation, my ears pricked up immediately when you started talking about the way, and we're going to get into the detail of this, but when you
Yeah.
started talking about the quinaries and then the tantalizing possibility of marrying the angels and demons and I guess the cornerstone of ceremonial magic with
Mhm.
astrology in a way that's practical and useful. And I just think that that's fantastic, and I can't wait to start talking about it.
Yeah.
But before we do, why don't you tell the folks who you are? and
Yeah. Well, Jamie Paul Lamb, I've been, I started my journey sort of in Western esotericism and related, whatever we call our thing, our Cosa Nostra, um, has, I kind of started down that road maybe 15 years ago. And I began with Freemasonry and then kind of branching out from there into Hermetic avenues, eventually the um, SRICF, Societas Rosicruciana, and the Rosicrucian Masonic Society,
yep.
and then some Golden Dawn. And then I decided, there's magic, there's alchemy, there's astrology. You know how it is. There's Kabbalah and all the GD stuff introduces, but I ended up kind of specializing at some point. I think everybody kind of does. You kind of find your lane and then you begin to whittle it down because nobody has unlimited amount of time to just, have your dip a toe in every pond. So I just started to, I figured astrology is kind of the central, you can't do alchemy without astrology. You maybe magic, you could say that too if you're talking about electional things. So astrology is just like foundational, you
Mm,
know. So I really wanted to tighten that up about 10 years ago. And ever since then it's been, and it's weird though, because when I first got into astrology, it was, I think the first book that really turned me on where I was like, whoa, this is great, was Dane Rudyard of
mm,
all people. It was the astrology of personality. Now, where I'm at now is different from where I was at then, of course, but I could probably still go back. Maybe one day I'll make a full circle and go back to Rudyard and just dig into that whole thing again. But I ended up, that's mid 20th century, early to mid 20th century.
mm.
And then, and then I decided I took the AFA course, the
Yep.
Astrological Federation of America or American Federation of Astrology.
Mm.
They're right here. They're like 15 miles from me.
Oh, wow.
And so I took that course, but it was like uh 12 letter alphabet stuff.
Yep.
Really lame, like 20th century hippie, new agey stuff. And I just, I did it because I paid for it, but then after that, I took Chris Brennan's course, like right when he rolled that out, whenever that was, 8 years ago or something like
Yeah.
that. And and then a little bit with Warnock, mostly horary with Warnock.
Oh,
And then
interesting.
my magic stuff kind of, you know, I've always been interested in it and the grimoire tradition and things like that, just, from various different angles, so mostly through a Grippin sort of lens. That's been my bedrock, Agrippa.
Yep.
But but so that kind of cycled through as well. And, so most of my astrological magic comes from either a grip or Picatrix or, the Shams or some of
Mm.
those sources.
Yeah. So were you
But
were you reading Agrippa before you started studying with Warnock? Because I understand you said mostly horror-y, but we share Warnock as a teacher. That's how I got
yeah,
into astrological magic and how I learnt
right.
the rigor of it. Was Agrippa
Mhm.
there beforehand, or was
Yes.
yeah, cool.
Yeah, I got into Agrippa I was lucky. I got into that pretty early on, like my first couple years getting into this sort of world,
Mm.
you know, and it's been, that's a constant for me.
Yeah, that would have been back before the Purdue translation, back in
Oh
the
yeah,
yeah,
this is the
the
Tyson one
Tyson.
on Llewellyn.
Yep,
Yeah,
fair.
I basically have another book written in the marginalia of my Tyson book. It's highlighted, with all different highlighter colors. There's
Yeah.
little note tabs that I put on pages. There's marginalia, enough for another book probably. And it's just it's a really beat up looking book.
Oh,
Let's say that.
that's fair. I'm the same, right? Like a book is
Yeah,
never the same after it's been with me for like a couple of weeks, and I've decided to give it a good treatment, so to speak.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I chew up books. I can't have nice books.
Well, I'm looking at your book, right? And I'm just it's still pristine because I didn't want to write anything in it until after I'd spoken to you for some reason. But normally, a couple of weeks into owning a book, it's just unrecognizable. It's got all the tabs and it's got the highlighter and it's got the marginalia and what have you. But
For
this thing,
sure.
I'm treating it as almost like a I don't know. It's a sacred text, and we're going to get into it a little bit more. But I guess before we do, what was the origin story of the book? Like, what was the moment that made you realize you had to write it?
It was, and there was a moment when that happened. It was, I think I was using the tarot to make sort of a movable temple,
Okay.
just using the Golden Dawn sort of annual, the decanal situation that you do with the pips,
Yep.
and I had made sort of a magic circle,
Mm.
a microcosm, and I was doing some vaguely goetic work in there, just kind of, with this portable magic circle that is the tarot cards. I started using them that way. I forget who kind of, have you heard of people doing that? Using the
Yeah.
tarot to kind of set the temple.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I was doing that, and I remember thinking, I had heard about the quinaries, but there's like really not much written about that.
Yeah.
Um, and I had known um, that like with the decans, you could, fine tune things with these various little arc segments, a 30-degree arc segment, a 10-degree, of course you have signs, you have liturgoi or whatever, there's all these monomoria,
Yeah.
single. So I think, how did that happen? I was like, I was like, okay, so all of my planets are going to be in a certain decan and they're going to be in a certain quinary too.
Mm.
So I looked into the Sefer Raziel Hamalak,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I got the Shem Angel attributions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think I got there by going, I'm trying to reconstruct it. I think I
Yeah.
got there by going through Reuchlin
Okay.
and
Okay.
or Kircher.
Yeah.
Reuchlin and or Athanasius Kircher,
Mm-hmm.
and then putting together that, I've always been interested in systems. I like cosmological systems, and I love astrology because it's so satisfying. The thema mundi all the way up to
Oh yeah.
the whole. It's just such a satisfying system. And I feel very medieval like that. I feel like
Yeah.
I really value the medieval tidiness, the systemization and the tidiness of your typical medieval polymath. It's really
Mm.
attractive to me. But anyway, so and then you know how long it took for that demon catalog to finally result in the early modern period to
Yeah.
72. I mean, we're talking from the Testament of Solomon when you
Mm.
first get like what 50 something demons there,
Yeah.
and then basically through the Quran and through the Arabian Nights and the Hygromantia,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
then into the more properly recognizably Solomonic stuff in the early modern period. And then finally, the Goetic catalog of the spirit catalog in the Goetia, 72 makes sense. Somebody gave them attributions. I was reading Rudd
Okay.
via Skinner,
Oh, the
you
Skinner.
know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Heard of
Yeah,
it. Yep, yep, yep. The
yeah,
Goetia of Dr. Odd. Yep, got it. Yeah.
exactly. So I was getting deep into that, and but somewhere along the line, there was a moment, and I can't, I can't really frame it right, but I thought to myself, how did the demon and angel presiding over that quinary affect my placement there? You
Mm.
know, so I thought somebody had to have written about this, right? Somebody had to have
Yeah.
collated the information and said, if you have Venus, in the 36th quinary or whatever, then that's going to color your Venus just like a sign, would qualitatively, hot and moist and fixed,
Mm.
whatever.
Mm.
Like, so and it could work, then I kind of extrapolated that it could work in horary,
Yeah.
it could work in electional
Mm.
astrology. So that's
Well,
kind of how it came about.
one of the things that I
Oh,
that I oh, go ahead, please. Yeah.
the last thing was I wasn't able to find where somebody had done that.
Yeah.
So to the roundabout way of answering your questions, I had to write. That's when I knew I had to write the book. Was, I can't find it because either nobody's written it or it's lost or who kn- I can't imagine that nobody had thought that before though.
Yeah,
You
well, I
know?
mean, it's interesting because both of those, like when you look at astrology and the history of astrology, we get to sort of the Persia, medieval, Renaissance kind of period, and I think that's when the systematization of astrology goes pretty bonkers in terms of people, systematizing all of the delineations, and we start to get that really rich kind of period in astrological history. And at the same time, you're getting a whole bunch of ceremonial and Solomonic kind of systemization as well. And it's interesting that the crossover never properly happened because astrology is just nested systems within systems, right? Just like you
Right.
were saying, you can have the 12 zodiacs, you can have the 36 decans, you can have the 72 quinaries, and so on and so forth, and all of the different ways in which the geometry kind of works within that circle, literally, and
Yeah.
yet there wasn't any kind of crossover, at least not with what we've got. So that must have
Yeah.
been tantalizing when you first discovered it, and you were like, "Oh
Yeah.
my god, I gotta do this."
Exactly. Yeah. And it,
Yeah,
it, quickly became front and center. I was already working on some other stuff and I was like, no,
yeah,
this has to come first.
yeah. How
But
long did it take from sort of the idea to the book? How long did you go
four
into
years,
that?
4 or 5 years, probably.
Yeah, yeah. God,
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of, trial and error. I mean, I did work up some charts to just see what it looked like,
mm,
nativities and things. But yeah, and then I wanted to, I also, I think there's a little piece in there about the talismanic use of them, making talismans, just like you would a decanal talisman, right?
yeah.
Um, and uh, and I'm sure that there was something in the I'm going to butcher this name, Salmeshkianaka. You
Mm-hmm.
ever hear of that one? The
No.
Salmeshkian Book of Images.
Okay.
It's Salmeshkianaka is an old Babylonian, actually proto-astrological
Mm.
text, I think, because if we say astrology is planets and signs and houses and
Yep.
aspects, um, this is, I think, proto-astrological, but they talk about
Mm.
quinaries in there,
Yeah.
and I put it in my book.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's a really crazy history with so many holes in it,
Yeah, yeah. I remember
and
I'm reading in the book about the history of the quinaries, and I'm like, oh, okay, so it's sort of Babylonian in origin, and then they
yeah,
start to kind of filter through. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's really strange. And I thought, oh yeah, the talisman angle of it. I was just applying your typical sort of Ibn Qura kind of
Yep.
work on it. But you know, I have made some quinarian talismans,
Yeah.
and I do them basically the same way because there are, if you look in the reference section, there are planetary and metallic correspondences. I put as many correspondences as I thought was necessary.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's
for
difficult not to go crazy with the correspondences, but I think one of the things that I love about this book is that there's incredible clarity and there's also brevity without losing meaning, right?
Mm,
So obviously your kind of I guess love of systems is paying off because what we've got is something that slots into pre-existing structures for electional, pre-existing structures for horary, pre-existing structures for natal. It's really quite beautiful in its own
yeah,
way. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Thanks for that. I think, yeah, having it. Yeah, it is. It is naturally. You're an astrologer. You know that you
Mm.
can't apply every technique to every chart.
Yeah.
It's in fact bad astrology. I mean,
Yeah. Well,
do you find that?
I do. What I find is you've got to stick within one system, and sometimes the systems are I guess kind of contradictory in a sense,
Mhm.
right? You can kind of,
Yeah.
and for that reason, because there is such a multiplicity of systems, you can pick, you can cherry pick really easy. The temptation is to cherry pick, and especially retrospectively as well. If you're looking to
Right.
analyze an event that's already occurred, you're like, well, I can take a little bit from Perso-Arabic, I can take a little bit from Hellenistic, I can take a little bit from why not psychological, right? And
Right.
just
Right.
try and sort of knit that into a meaningful answer. But yeah, no, I've noticed that a lot. It's the temptation's there.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's certain things we gravitate towards, right? So
Mm.
my primary um I love Ferdaria, but I more often probably use uh perfections
Yep.
at various scales, down to the day, down to the hour. Sometimes I'll perfect down to the hour. It's a sexagesimal system, so
Mm.
you can get it down so granular. I'm sure you can go down to a second, the planetary ruler of every second.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that about perfections, and that you don't
Mm.
need another chart. You've already got the whole chart, and it could just fractally spiral down to such fine granulation. I love that.
Yeah.
But but to apply every technique, you know,
Mm.
to a chart, yeah, you get that tendency to cherry, oh, this looks good, and
Mm.
to piece together something. But I think the quinaries are something like that.
Yeah.
There's something you probably want to go in there with a purpose and use them purposefully, like maybe even on their own.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, I wouldn't necessarily build it into a typical natal consultation.
Mm. Mm.
If I was
Yeah.
having a natal consultation, I probably wouldn't break out this technique. I think it's while it is applicable astrologically
Yeah.
in various branches of astrology, like we discussed,
Mm.
um, I don't think it's something. I think it's something you do kind of. It's the way I think of it anyway. It's something you do
Yeah.
purposefully as a separate sort of feature. You know.
I mean, obviously, I'm new to it. And even an in-depth treatment of quinaries. This is the first instance where I've been able to find something that's so clear and so concise and so, I guess without losing the meaning behind it. So I'm fascinated, but I'm not going to jump immediately into using it in consultations until I understand the way it relates to other systems.
Sure.
And so, in terms of, I guess, what the core idea of the book sort of is, it seems to me like there's this tremendous opportunity to bridge a divide that is for everyone on both sides of it quite chiasmatic basically, which is
Yeah.
ceremonial magicians and people who work in that Solomonic and Goetic mode. Um, they don't really sort of pay too much attention to astrology, right? And
Day and
astrology,
hour.
yeah, day and hour. That's it.
Right.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that's cool. And then astrologers tend to get freaked out by demons. Really, if we're gonna bottom line it,
Yeah.
angels fine, demons not so fine. And
Exactly. And inner traditions even told me that they were like, we're having a hard time with some of the vendors. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like really in terms of stereotypes, which is kind of what a lot of astrologers have to go off without committing to reading, the Hygromantia in depth, for example, or any of the other Solomonic keys and
Yeah.
grimoires in depth. They just go off the stereotypes that they've got about ceremonial magic and the way in which it's so it's risky. It's
Yeah.
risky, right? And from an astrological perspective, I've dipped my toe into astrological magic because it allows me to stay within my kind of comfort zone of, yeah, cool, I know exactly how the system works, and it's leading with
Hmm.
astrology in order to get to magic. And then you've got the reverse on the other side of this big divide. And what I'm
Right.
seeing in the book is there's this opportunity to bridge the two in a way that's deeply meaningful and applicable to both, and in a way that seems to improve the practice of both.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think there's a great overlap there, and
Mm.
that was one of the main features of the book that I wanted to, I think I said it in the introduction that this is
Yeah.
something that, there's a place where they were divided at some point, and
Mm.
now I think that whereas the quinaries actually spent more time in the keeping of the ceremonial magic
Yeah.
current, because we never use them in astrology.
Mm.
Um, I don't see anybody using them in astrology, even though they are an astrological concept going back to that book of images, that Babylonian Salmeshkianaka.
Mm.
But somewhere around then they sort of separated. But I do think the Golden Dawn, there was something with the Shem angels that they
Yeah.
used. I don't think they folded in the Goetic demons, which is weird because Mathers did that translation
Yeah.
of the Goetia, but they just had the Shem angels
Mm.
on the quinaries. If I remember, might be a Z document or some inner order flying roll or something like that.
Well, I
But
think that kind of reflects, I think, where a lot of astrologers are approaching this, which is, okay, look, if I have to kind of engage with that side of the tradition, I'm going to stick with the angels, I'm going to ignore the demons. And, I'm guilty of that as well, really, until I started reading the section of the book that outlines all of the quinaries and gives, descriptions of, the angelic correspondences, the angelic delineations, and the demonic delineations. And then I found my ascendant, the 10th quinary. I found the position of the moon, and the parts that sort of were resonant with me weren't the angelic significations; they were the demonic significations
right,
in the way that kind of classical astrological approach can sometimes nail it so accurately,
sure.
and really sort of describe a lot about that particular part of your chart. The ascendant, for instance, for me, the
Yeah,
demonic significations of that indicate things like
yeah,
herbs and alchemy, and I'm like, oh great, yeah, cool, that's me. And then the lunar side of things and the position of the ruler of my moon is like, oh, philosophy and esotericism, and I'm like, oh great, well I'm a philosopher by training, and I'm like,
yeah,
okay, but these are all the demonic significations, so I'm there having a
right,
crisis, a kind of moral crisis, going, well, I think I'm a little bit more aligned with the demonic. And
right.
just to kind of go from that into the big question here, or the big sort of the elephant in the room, what are we talking about when we're talking about demons?
So I know this is different from tradition to tradition, but I kind of
Mm.
think of the demons as of course, they're mediating spirits. We could
Mm.
say spirit and demon, same thing. Um, I think of them as being decanal and down from there.
Yeah.
Decanal, so against the Ogdoad or the firmament of the fixed stars in the zodiac, and down. Maybe down as far as the fiery or aerial spheres.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I tend to bracket them cosmologically or maybe ontologically between the sphere of the fixed stars in the zodiac and let's say the maybe sublunary fire and aerial.
Okay.
Does that sound about standard for how do you think of them in terms of their hierarchical stratification?
Well, I tend to place them ontologically, like diametrically opposite to the angels. So, again, because I'm approaching this from the position of astrology and not necessarily in reverse,
Hmm.
I see, angels are beyond the fixed stars in the zodiac, and they're
Hmm.
sort of closer to the one, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the
Maybe in the
demons
noose or
in
something.
the noose, yeah, the
Hmm.
noose sphere or whatever it is, right?
Hmm.
That's where I would kind of place them in terms of how I've encountered them through literature, and then of course my own personal interactions with angels. And I haven't had much to do with the Shem angels, but working
Right.
with, for instance, the Pleiades and Zazalbio and some of the other angelic kind of influences that are more directly explained in things like Three Books of Occult Philosophy or the Picatrix.
Hmm.
They're very much, the big sort of stereotype about the angels is they're like mathematical equations, or they're so
Exactly.
abstract. They're ideas. They're ideas.
Right.
And my personal experience, magically working with them, encountering with them, it's like this isn't sublunary. And yet, when I think about the demons, I'm thinking sublunar. I'm thinking,
Right.
elemental. I'm thinking much closer, almost chthonic, really, like almost, beneath.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. And you know, I mean, we do know that even in the earliest, the beginnings of this demon catalog in
mm,
the Testament of Solomon, they do talk about the seven sisters. So the
mm,
Pleiades are in there.
mm,
There are I think there are zodiacal and decanal demons
mm,
in the Testament of Solomon in that early catalog of 50 something. So I don't know. Yeah, I kind of see them like maybe not being able to penetrate the Ogdoad, but still being able to mediate and carry messages, I suppose, you know. But
mm,
of course, handing off to angels at that point.
mm,
I tend to think of the Iamblican or really the Proclean kind of ontological scheme, and how, that's kind of
mm,
my go-to to put in the hierarchy there, and the chains, the Sirai, the
yeah,
chain of being and stuff. But the interesting thing, it's different than other daimonic work I have done regarding, like, you could use the Almutin Figuris
mm,
as a sort of guardian daimon according to Ibn Ezra and Mashallah. I think it was
mm,
Mashallah. Yeah, Mashallah.
mm,
So that I found really valuable too, is finding out the planetary affiliation or the Siri that or Sira that your daimon belongs to,
mm,
and then using that for to reverse engineer, the cosmic ascent through the spheres, a la the Poimandres
mm,
124 through 26 or whatever, where he goes up through the cosmic.
mm.
How does he word it? How does what's his name word it? Copenhaver says through the cosmic framework,
Yeah, yeah,
and then through each of the planets, surrendering a vice, virtue, or passion or whatever at each sphere.
mm,
That was my daimonic work. That's
yeah.
that's what I'm writing about now, actually, is
Oh, cool.
more piecing together that. But
Mm.
it's different than this goetic quinarian stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
And I mean, a lot of astrologers that are going to approach this book without necessarily having very much at all to do with, the ceremonial magic side of things, they're going to go for it with like angels good, demons evil. And it's
I'm
not the
sure.
case. And it's only because of my own studies in philosophy with Plato particularly that I'm like,
Mhm.
no, 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 not demon, daemon.
Right,
Like
exactly.
not evil, just be careful, be careful. And you've got to be careful with angels as well, of course, but it
Sure.
seems like there's greater cautions to be placed around demons simply because they're not necessarily evil, but they're not necessarily good, and because they're a little bit lower in the chain than the
That's
angelic,
it.
you've got to be careful. Hence the all of the Solomonic kind of guardrails and the necessity of the phylactery and the necessity of the circle
Ex
and so on. So
exactly.
I mean, when you're creating talismans, for instance, um, are you working within a Solomonic circle? Do you have a triangle of art? Are you going through the ritual structure that's associated with that, or is it more? Is it looser? How are you doing it?
I do it more on the astrological magic side than
Mm,
the ceremonial magic side. So I do it more
mm,
like I would do any talisman. I don't
Yeah.
do any much different. I'll get as much synthemata together to make that connection as possible.
Mm.
The appropriate color candle, at least for my understanding, the appropriate suffumigation. Whenever I touch the talisman, I do it only during, good, the appropriate charts. I don't get too crazy about it. And I
Yeah.
have done day and hour if it's just I'm going to spray paint something real quick.
Yeah.
If I got to do day and hour on some simple procedure, you know, but
Mm.
I prefer to get as deep into a chart as possible
Mm.
with good elections. But yeah, so but but yeah, that's about what was there was something else. Anyway, you were saying?
Well, no, I'm wondering like who's the book sort of for really,
Oh
because
yeah,
I want to tell every astrologer I know to go and get this book because it's just what's necessary in order to start to cross pollinate, which I think is really important. I think it's
yeah,
important in terms of cross pollinating because astrologers can learn a lot from ceremonial magicians. And vice versa, really. When it comes to, I'm a bit biased, right? I'm astrologer first, an astrological magician first. But
right.
imagine, Solomonic operations that are electionally timed. That's and producing, for instance, Solomonic pentacles like Warnock does with an electional chart behind it. That's the kind of tempting, the carrot, so to speak, that kind of
For
is there.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think in his Rudd's Goetia, Skinner talks about the moving the triangle of art. It doesn't have to stay in the east.
Mm.
I
Mm.
think he moves it around the 360 degrees of his circle, even
Yeah.
depending on where this is what Rudd did, where
Yeah.
the demon was coming from. So there was a lot of more of an astrological underpinning before the Enlightenment era, you
Mm.
know, in ceremonial magic than there is today. 20th century ceremonial magic, I don't think is as astrologically grounded as the angel magicians in Western Europe that you
Mm.
had during the 16th, 17th century. You had
Yeah.
people who were proper angel magicians. I think even Lilly was an
Mm.
angel magician, and maybe even Ashmole. Who knows? I mean, a lot of those guys were, and I think all the way up till maybe even Hockley, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
being one of the later iterations of Sibley. I'm
Mm.
sure Sibley was. So, because and who knows how deep like even somebody like Robert Flood got into it, you know.
Yeah, and I think really
Not
that divide that comes post Descartes and post Enlightenment really has to do, I think, with astrology's frustrating tendency to try and justify itself as a science, but a
uh,
science in an atheistic materialist paradigm, which
yeah.
is, I mean, worldview's what it's all about, really. Like, your worldview is going to influence the reality that you live in, and
You
astrology
sound like
just
you sound like you studied with Warnock.
I know, right? I'm looking over here at my bookcase. I can see my
Right.
copy of the Elizabethan World Picture, but
Oh yeah, I got
yeah,
mine.
yeah, yeah, it's good.
Uh-huh.
I'm thankful to him for finally getting me to buy that.
For sure.
But I mean, like astrology has this really frustrating tendency to try and ally itself with post-Cartesian science, and it just willingly divests itself of the magical and the non-material, and it's really because the promise that's contained in relating the celestial bodies which are observable with the five senses to all of the corresponding causes on earth and the correlations, sorry,
Hmm.
that's something that's really kind of taken it down the path that ends in people like Rudyard, and that
Yeah.
kind of ends before this big renaissance that we're having at the moment, ends in the
Right.
psychological school, which I think has value, but you're missing the enchantment, you're missing the magic. And then the people, the kind of the ceremonial line has just never left the enchanted cosmology because, very rightly, the assumption is
Right.
these are not psychological forces we're talking about. These are external, ontologically kind of distinct beings that the kind of you have to have a worldview that incorporates that in order to work with them. And I think this is the perfect time for a book like this to bridge that divide and to show how it's possible to move forward with both sides being enchanted in their own way again, I guess,
For
astrology more
sure.
prominently.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time talking about that in there in a couple of places. Um, And yeah, the worldview, I mean, it's necessary. I mean, even if we're just going back and observing with no intention to recreate or do any operations or practices, knowing what they believed and what,
Mm.
knowing their cosmological perspective or ontological perspectives. I mean,
Yeah.
it's crucial to getting to know, getting an idea of the work. But
Yeah, and I mean, the promise with traditional astrology and classical astrology has always been accuracy, and I
yeah,
think that you don't really get accuracy without kind of having an enchanted cosmology to underpin it, and the direct relationship between those two, between accurate astrological praxis and an enchanted worldview, is a little bit murky, and there's some work that needs to be done on clarifying that. But if you've got an enchanted worldview, you've got something closer to a classical cosmology with, the Ogdoad and then all of the planetary spheres and what have you. But the thing at the very end of the book, right? The
yeah.
very last chapter is,
Hmm.
the possibility here, the promise, if we take the conclusions of the foregoing chapters, is that you can have almost like a pre-causal astrology.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah,
oh my God, yeah, please say more about that.
that's what sort of that was fascinating, and it was an afterthought. It's at
Mm,
the end of the book because, well, I wanted it at the end of the book, but it was the very last thoughts. It was my final thought. It's those are my final thoughts on this project and how it kind of, well, just to end that the sort of worldview thing we were talking about was, it's I was thinking about it. It's based sort of on your aptitude to like, if aptitude as in like methexis or what was it, epitidietes, I think the theurgists would call it, but
mm,
where where do you have a wide enough aperture of awareness to perceive these things? Like people see UFOs or they see ghosts or they, see and I would think of that as a priori ridiculous years ago,
mm, mm.
as little as 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, but now it's like, well, maybe this person either just naturally has a wider aperture or a lower
Mm,
threshold of conceivability.
mm.
It's maybe it's not for me something that's inconceivable is seeing a gray alien,
Yeah.
that's and because it's inconceivable to me, I don't have access to that sort of bandwidth.
Mm,
So I use a ridiculous sort of example like that, but it is there's a lot of like aptitude and fitness,
mm,
Iamblichus would I think say, fitness to perceive these well, really extrasensory perception, not ESP in terms of telekinesis or telepathy, but
mm,
extrasensory perception that's perception that's not necessarily empirical,
mm.
but that is a metaphysical perception. And
Yeah.
you hear about it in the religions,
Mm.
um, but maybe I don't know if Kant or somebody cracked that open or something, but it seems like it would be one of the German idealists would probably have talked about this before.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing here is that you can have an astrology that's outside of time. And
Mm,
that's, I mean, you can't think with that. You can't think that or hold that conceptually in
yeah,
a straightforward or linear way. It's like a koan almost, right?
yeah,
Like you have to kind of break open the linear mind to kind of conceive that the whole system of astrology can actually function outside of time when the whole thing is basically a timekeeping device. And
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Like we were saying, if astrology is maybe the study of meaningful time, you'll
yeah,
sometimes hear that as a definition. The study of meaningful time. I think that's that's wide enough to encompass, I think, all astrologies that we have. But this, yeah, I think the last paragraph. Can I read it real quick?
oh please do,
The
yeah.
last. All right. Since the quinaries make noetic astrology possible, like what we were just talking about,
Mm,
astrology beyond the fixed stars in the zodiac, beyond
mm,
the Ogdoad,
mm,
since they make this sort of noetic astrology possible, and the intellectual plane is not subject to the fates and fortunes of the stars and planets, we are now confronted with a pre-causal astrology. So yeah, outside of time, in like, and a digression here, but recently,
Mm.
uh, and it's through theological pursuits, I started to think about eternity, not so much as an infinite expanse of time in both directions, and these a sequence. Uh, but I think of it more as I'm beginning to think of it more as the completion or the fruition of time,
Mm.
the perfection of time.
Mm.
Because you know how when you're in a dream, we were talking about psychology. That's another word that sort of
Mm.
flips because if it's this suke, it's the logos of the suke,
Mm.
it's not necessarily the science of the mind, it's
Yeah.
the understanding of the soul, you know.
Yeah.
There's something, there's a psychology, like Plato's psychology is a lot different than Carl Jung or Freud's psychology or anybody,
Mm.
Reich or anybody. Plato's psychology is the myth of Ur.
Yeah.
Plato's psychology is in the Timaeus
Mm.
or the Critias. So
Mm.
anyway, yeah. So that notion of timelessness
Mm.
or the completion of time as eternity, and
Mm.
it's the same with infinity on the spatial axis. I
Yeah.
think infinity is it the the expanse in both directions interminably,
Mm.
or is it the completion of space somehow, So I think this
Mm.
noetic plane, it's not my invention, but certainly it's pre-causal because there can be no causality in that space, right?
Yeah.
If you can call it a space on that plane.
Well, it's about
Any
it's about the primacy of mind, right? So, like all of the
mm,
psychologies, even including Plato's, right?
mhm.
What isn't accounted for is an immaterial, prominence of mind that can contain all of this, that can kind of exist outside of time, for example.
Yeah,
And it's if you've got a worldview where consciousness, ergo mind, is an emergent quality of matter rather
mm,
than the other way around, which actually is
right.
kind of where science is leading us right now. The cutting edge is consciousness is primary, and it's the stuff of the universe, and it's not emergent.
They have no choice. They don't want to do it, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
They don't want to go there. I mean, it's scary.
No. And I
Yeah,
mean, kudos to them, right, for actually being scientists and letting the data,
right.
influence the
Yeah,
theory and not sort of brute forcing it. Even though the data is saying the theory reflects and makes the data, basically,
yeah,
it's funny stuff, yeah. But I interrupted
yeah.
you. Sorry, you were reading
No,
that
it's
last
fine.
passage, yeah.
Let's see. So, this is to some extent absurd because time and causality are the media and substance of astrology. Yet here we are, having stormed the zodiacal gates and torn back the celestial curtains of the firmament, we stand before the cosmic maw of eternity, the first time upon which all subsequent eternal recurrences have been patterned with angels as our guides. So
Mm.
there's some Eliada in there, you
Yeah.
know, um, and some Jeremy Nadler, his
Mm.
Temple of the Cosmos,
Mm.
about the Egyptian Zep Tepi the first time. So basically, I this is a notion I really love, and I think this is kind of where we're working, where we have an opportunity to work astrologically, is on that noetic plane. That you know, that's kind of where those eternal recurrences happen. Like let's say your typical annual cycle in a initiatic order.
Mm. Mm.
There's usually some circumambulations. There's a lot of
Mm.
cosmological stuff, and
Mm.
even going back to Iamblichus and the Greco-Egyptian magical traditions,
Mm.
you always find that the let's say, is always building a microcosmos. In
Mm.
fact, you might even say that theurgy, in doing
Mm.
God's work is creation. So we're doing a microcosmogenesis. Theurgy as microcosmogenesis, creating a little world as a sort of
Yeah, of course. I think I'm. Yeah. You just dropped out there. Sorry. Theurgy as creating a microcosmogenesis is the last thing I got.
Yeah, theurgy is a microcosmogenesis and
Mm.
doing the work of God and sort of being a subcontractor type of theurge
Mm.
or demiurge, you know, the magician as, demiurge.
Yeah.
And regarding the first time, though, is that it's almost part of the cosmic return part of it would be
Mm.
like participation. They put great emphasis on methexis, participation in what Eliade called paradigmatic events or primordial events.
Mm.
When we do a paradigmatic ritual that is participating in a primordial, you know,
Mm.
mythological event,
Mm.
that's eternally recurring, but we
Yeah.
tap into that we're somehow able to bridge between the noetic and the and soul and nature, the
Mm.
world soul and nature world soul nous. So
Mm.
we're kind of getting like a almost like another image of the chain. We're
Mm.
participating in these events. Like the first time somebody, Nadler uses an example that the pharaoh who you would think would be the guy would be getting fed grapes and fanned with palm leaves all day long and laying in a lounge,
Yeah.
but he was like the busiest guy in the kingdom. His whole day was ritual. His whole day was planned out because he had to stave off chaos,
Yeah.
by being cosmic.
Yeah.
So his day was cosmic ritual like all day long. And he was participating in that cosmogenesis
Mm.
to stave off chaos. And, with chaos and cosmos being diametrically opposed in
Mm.
meaning, the order and low entropic state of cosmos and the high entropic, uh, chaos.
Mm. Mm.
I don't
Well,
know.
no, no.
It's easy to spin off.
Well, no, I like where that's going though, because if we take the ruler, or we take the pharaoh, or we take the king as the representative of the kingdom, right, as the incarnate kind of in the flesh, right, the human-shaped representative, and all of the forces and influences that are acting upon them. Not only do we understand why the first astrologies were based, or the first real sort of natal astrologies kind of, were sort of directed towards the leader and the king and what's the fate and fortune of the kingdom as a result of that person. We also get that kind of antidote to the way in which astrology and branching off from magic post-enlightenment kind of seeks to remove the human, which is a funny way of thinking about a discipline that's kind of centered on mostly birth charts and mostly natal post enlightenment, right? Post classics.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty easy stretch to go, well, maybe astrology in its current form is just trying to explain a universe without the human, and the human is just a convenient sort of representative in that space. But if we take Quinarian astrology, and if we take the astrology beyond the Ogdoad, and that final part of the book, which must have been, I got to ask you about that process. I'll do it in a tick. It's like it's recentering the human in astrology, because you're when you're talking at that sort of pre-causal level, it's hard to find language for it for a start, right? You have to describe it, or you have to experience it. And it's like trying to describe sex before you have it for the first time. You can use all the words in the universe, but once you do the deed, you know what people are talking about, right?
Exactly.
And in a way, magic's like that as well, describing that feeling of just nailing it when the magic's there. It never gets old. It's always the same. And so you're recentering the human and the human experience, and you're recentering the human as that, in a way, representative or incarnate kind of participant and creator and demiurgic creator in all manner of different microcosms, for the individual and for the crossover into natal, and using Quinarian astrology as a natal tool. It's perfect for that point in a reading where you're really trying to speak at that highest level beyond the causal, when you're not looking at why don't I have a job yet, when am I going to get married, etc., etc., and you're working with clients in a spiritual way, in a spiritual capacity. It's perfect for that, and it must have been so hard to get to the end of the book and the end of the process and go, oh, you know, I should spend another 20 years writing this out. You know what I mean? Like, you must have
Right.
had to have cut it at some point. What
I
was the
had to.
hardest part of writing the book, really?
Yeah, yeah. I'd say that, getting up to there, and then it was kind of like for like a non plus ultra sort of thing. It was like
Mm,
I can't go further than this
mm,
personally. Like I don't know enough right now, and I
mm,
haven't worked with this enough to know what you know, I guess super Ogdoadic
mm,
astrology looks like, or whatever, noetic astrology. What does that even mean?
mm.
Like how, but
Well, how would you kind of make a noetic astrological election? That's, I mean, it's this really beautiful tension point, and it's the tension point out of which much creativity is going to come. Trust me.
right,
Between like astrology beyond time and practices that are about choosing the right time for things, and not just
right,
analyzing times that have already passed. It's being able to situate future times and going, well,
yeah,
how on earth do we kind of translate that down whilst also
yeah,
staying at a level that incorporates, the entire cosmos, basically, for the individual, for the person for
for
whom you're
sure,
electing things.
yeah,
It's fascinating. It's so fascinating, and the way in which you're able to describe these really intense concepts, right? I love this
yeah,
book because it challenged me intellectually so much. Your writing is so clear and so crisp, and your ability to delineate concepts, which again is just so difficult to do using normal language without boiling the ocean, basically.
right,
It's one of the best parts of the book, mate. Like the process itself, the language in which it's written, it's fantastic. It's phenomenal. And I guess
well,
what I want to ask is like,
yeah.
did the book change the process that you use to write books? Did the book change the way that you're, I guess, going to be writing books into the future?
I hope so, because I have three books before this, but they're
Mm.
sort of in the Masonosphere,
Yep.
Western esotericism and Freemasonry, because I kind of cut my teeth in the Masonic world as a writer. That I came up through their journals and quarterlies and whatever, and then into a few um, full length books. But this was my first one outside of that,
Mm.
and my first one with a big publisher too. Inner Traditions, they're like a Simon and Schuster company. This isn't one of the small
Mm.
Masonic imprints I've been dealing with, so this was different.
Mm.
But I spent a lot of time trying to make it digestible, because I
Mm.
had made so many mistakes in earlier books, with just like, trying to use the right word, and I would use the right word, but not everybody knows what Tiferet is or
Yeah.
whatever. You know what I mean?
Mm.
One of these, not everybody would say methexis and then leave that untranslated.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, so it's like, I mean, they would in the secondary literature, that you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
late antique Platonism or something,
Mm-hmm.
but not in for the layperson or whatever, or not even if you're just trying to get a point across. So I tried to. It took a lot, because it's hard for me to not, if I'm just writing something,
Mm.
um, the first crack, there's too many big words. It's hard to understand, and it's too dense. I'm putting
Yeah.
everything in a sentence. That's my tendency. My natural tendency to write is really
Mm.
brutal, really challenging, and really,
Yeah.
I don't know why it is that way. It's
Mm.
not as tedious as like and parenthetical as Arthur Edward Waite, if you've ever tried to read any of his stuff.
Yeah, the tarot. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Pictorial key to the
God,
tarot. Yeah,
it's
it's an
torture.
effort. It's an effort. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've read a lot of philosophy, so you've built up your calluses.
Yeah. Well, my doctorate was in Plato, which was wonderful, and Derrida. So like both ends of
Oh,
the
wow.
spectrum, and it's like. So
Yeah.
I get it, like, and so for that reason, like, big weighty books, that they're not so terrifying to me. But what you've done, right, is just for
Yeah.
example, right at the start, describing what the Shem HaMephorash is, right?
Yeah.
You've done that incredibly well, describing what the where we get the demons from the Ars Goetia.
Yeah.
It's great because I'm always at a loss to be able to distill that into relatable language for people outside
Yeah,
of
the Shem, how you it's booster photonic
yeah, as
as the cow or as the ox plows the field.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And okay, good. Like I mean, I always, again, I'm going into this going, well, it's Hebrew, so it's right to left. But no, 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 no. It's left to right, down, and across, down, and like back forth, back forth. And it's like,
Right.
oh, of course, and that's where you can
Yeah.
kind of see, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's one of the big sort of pluses, I think, is your ability to. I would imagine at great pain to be able to kind of condense things down to like a
Yeah.
paragraph because it's not a weighty tome. We're looking at what is it like a couple of hundred pages,
Yeah.
250 more or less. You know,
Yeah.
I think a writer 20 years ago would have put 800 pages to this and still not said everything.
You could have. I could have done that.
Yeah.
It would have been easy. It would have been easier to do that.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But thanks, I love hearing that because I'm not accustomed to hearing that. Believe me, from my other books,
Mm.
it's just pretty difficult, But here, I really did want to. I wanted to be transparent. That's another thing I was
Mm.
thinking of. I didn't want to have like really any discernible voice, other than just
Mm.
clarity and kind of. Just completely going for clarity. And I need to focus on that more because I've been doing some writing on Substack, and I'm
Yes.
I'm getting back into bad habits, I think.
Yeah.
But
Mm. Sort of.
because I'm not taking as much time, I get on Substack and I just bang out an article in a few hours or something,
Yeah.
and it's like if I were to sit with it a week or even a day, I would go
Yeah.
back in and I would clean it all up, but you
Uh,
know,
I think that's just the way of the world at the moment. This whole, I mean, we're all becoming publish or perish, which is the reason why I got out of academia and
right.
didn't pursue a career there after I finished my doctorate. Was just the necessity of having to publish or perish, constantly produce work like a battery hen, right?
Right.
I've always thought of myself as more free range, and that's how I like to approach writing, right?
Yeah.
If there's an egg, there's an egg. That's great. It might take a while for that to happen. It's not something I can produce on demand. But platforms like Substack, they're nabbing the people who kind of got through the net of the wider social media platforms. And so there's always that underlying thing where it's like, yeah, you can bang out an article in 4 hours and have that distributed out. And then
Yeah.
instead of spending time with it, you're on to the next idea. And you've
Exactly.
got such an easy way of just pushing content out. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I like your Substack though. I've been reading through your stuff. It's good. It's good.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, in terms of the book itself, like how are you hoping that the average punter who picks this up and is interested and is hearing the hype, how do you think it's going to like? How do you want them to change how they think or act? What are you wanting to change in the reader?
Well, I would certainly just like them to understand that this is a thing. I would like them to understand that I didn't make anything up
Mm,
here. Like none of this is these are all things, all the bits and pieces are there in the literature on the
mm,
on the Goetic side, the Solomonic side, and on the sort of Shem Kabbalistic uh, Judaic side of things. All of those pieces are there. The astronomical stuff and the
mm,
astrological stuff are there. The attributions are there. I didn't make up any attributions. The correspondences are there. I don't think I made any of the, no, I didn't make any of
no.
those up. I went through the magician's tables, and yeah, I didn't, none of those are made up. So the attributions, the correspondences, the order. Now the order is something because the Golden Dawn, you remember, they did like Leo
Yeah.
zero. They began in Leo, and I think that was based. I think that was an Egyptianism, something about Sirius, maybe at some time,
Mm,
if I recall. I don't remember, but there was something Egyptian that Mathers had about that when I was researching it. But
mm.
he's the only one I saw who began at zero Leos. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I
they're
think
heavy into the
maybe
fixed signs, the fixed sort of,
the
cross and the heavens.
tetramorph.
Tetramorph, that's it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I wrote a lot about the tetramorph in my Masonic books because that's a feature of Masonic symbolism. You a
Yeah.
Mason?
No, I'm not a Mason. No,
No,
no.
no.
I know Masons, and
Yeah,
I'm not familiar with Freemasonry, and
right.
I think it's probably because of the same reason why I'm not familiar with Solomonic magic or ceremonial magic,
Sure.
beyond just what I've kind of accumulated through osmosis over the
Right.
past couple of decades, just kind of
Oh,
being
I'm
around the
sure.
joint. But
Yeah.
it's I've always wondered about that because I'm also a tarot reader as well, and
Mm,
you get cards like Wheel of Fortune, you get cards that kind of show the tetramorph, and it's like that's
yeah.
interesting. Why the fixed signs? Why not the cardinal signs? That seems to make more
Right.
sense to my astrological mind.
Well, just to, I could tip that a little bit for you is I think it has to do with the Anno Lucas. What we call the Anno Lucas is the year of light in Freemasonry, and it's
Mm-hmm.
4000 BCE. And in 4000 BCE, the the vernal equinox would have occurred in Taurus,
Mm.
uh, tropically, I guess,
Yeah.
and the Leo would have been the royal arch,
Mm.
the keystone of the heavenly arch. So that
Yeah.
bleeds into a lot of masonry and appendant bodies, royal arch, and then into Golden Dawn and SRICA, SRIA, SRICF. And
Mm.
anyway, it's a whole world that, but
Regulus would have been in tropical Leo back then as well. Just doing some quick math, or would it be in tropical Cancer? It's 4,000. Anyway. Sorry, my mind goes to those places easily.
me too, me too. I get so distracted, but
Mm.
yeah, so yeah, I think the book I hope that astrologers find something practical in it in terms of um something that they could be active in terms of amelioration,
Mm.
mitigation, these sorts of active things that astrological magicians know about,
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
could easily translate into, things with temperament
Mm.
and spagyric tinctures and the
Mm.
humors and certain Ficino-esque musical choices and things like that. Oh,
Mm.
I should tell you, I don't know if you saw this on my website. I have a feature on my website,
Mm.
um, well, an offering on my website that is musical astrology, basically, where
Yep.
I take the natal chart and I use Gefurius, Francanus Gefurius's 1496 Musica Practicae correspondences.
Mm.
I use some early modern Rosicrucian correspondences,
Mm.
and I use the church modes, medieval church modes,
Mm.
uh, to planets, or yeah, to the planets, and I use Pythagorean ratios
Mm.
for the aspects. Because an aspect is you're inscribing a a, a polygon
Yeah.
in the circle. So there's the geometrical I mean, everything we talk about in terms of space and time, of course, is sexagesimal.
Mm.
60
Mm.
minutes, 90 degrees. All we have no other language but
Mm.
the 360-degree circle and its configurations. Anyway, but the what I was saying was I take somebody's nativity, let's say,
Yeah.
and I crunch that data down into, okay, what's the drone going to be? What's the underlying hum?
Yeah.
It might be. It depends. It's the art as well, the art of astrology, which is like, no, they've really got. It's not their Almut and Figuris. It's not the ruler of their ascendant, the Lord of the ascendant. Maybe it's a planet that's just really angular and really obviously maybe it's the final dispositor or something,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you figure out what entity is kind of obviously holding court,
Yeah.
and then just arrange the other pieces around it zodiacally and planetarily, and then also aspectually,
Mm.
because there are chords of music on the circle,
Mm.
you know
Mm.
so there are intervals, intervallic relationships, and those can be easily. I mean, if you know about this stuff and you read some, what's his name, the most prominent commentator on people like Flood and
Mm.
Pythagoras, and Jocelyn Godwin.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, Jocelyn Godwin has some excellent books on, this Pythagorean idea of the harmony of the spheres and how
Mm.
this translates to music. So I have an offering on my site where I take your nativity and I basically turn it into music
Oh,
and play it on my harmonium. I have a bellows operated reed organ called a harmonium that they
the
sometimes use in classical music, like, or Indian
Indian
classical
music,
music,
yeah, like kirtan stuff,
like
and
kirtan.
yeah, okay,
Exactly.
okay,
I have a
cool.
I have a kirtan organ.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I play people's natal charts. And would you believe I've been offering this for like minimum 5 years. It
yeah,
might have even been before COVID when I started offering this. I've had like less than 20 people hit me up on that.
yeah,
I would think that that would be like, oh my God, I got to hear my chart, because I offer like a 5, 6 minute MP3 that
right,
you could think of all the magic you could use. Think of all the personal work you could think of. Send me an election, and I could say you want to consecrate a talisman at this
yeah,
time.
yeah,
Don't go to Holst and put on his Jupiter or
yeah,
his Mercury because there's no synthemata in that. He didn't
mm,
know that shit. He didn't
mm,
know that he didn't know that he's kind of building this chain,
yeah,
in the chain of being. He just was like, "Oh, that sounds Jupiterian to me." You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
it
and that,
wasn't like he was using the Lydian mode, which is Jupiterian.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I mean that sort of feeds into our like our sort of I guess multimedia understanding of the planets is those historical moments where Holst has kind of done the planet suite, and it's like, yeah, no, that's part of my idea of what Jupiter is. And
yeah,
I love the way that, because astrology is able to be kind of used as a language, you can translate it across. And as a tarot reader, I'm also really visually kind of engaged with the cards. And
sure,
for example, like, with tarot, because I started so young, I wasn't reading, Wait, I wasn't reading any of the classics on there. I was just looking at the cards and just kind of doing art criticism when I first
hmm
started. And kind of being able to visualize the chart, that's kind of my entry point. That was my entry point into astrology, being able to look at the chart as an oracular kind of visual
yeah,
mandala before I started the deeper process of learning. And being able to kind of overlay sound onto that as well as vision and
mm,
hearing it would exactly what you're saying, right? It's going to be so much more accurate in terms of showing the true Jupiter, showing the true whatever. Electional charts for fixed stars, that's something we have no real analog of except for composers that have looked at the mythology and tried to
right,
put that into a kind of musical mode. And
for sure.
yeah, no, that sounds amazing. And it's
Yeah,
all
I
on the
love what you're
harmonium.
saying.
I mean, I just love the
Yeah,
sound of the harmonium. It's one of my favorite instruments.
yeah, it's really great. It's got a nice. You could set a drone on it.
Yeah.
Any key, any of the 12, and you play modally on. I mean, they're
Mm.
improvisations, but they're based on a certain handful of things that you can do.
Yeah.
Uh, Based on, again, the intervals, the zodiacal and planetary
Mm.
correspondences in music. And
Interesting.
so I like what you said though about the tarot and your approach. So years before I got into esotericism
Mm.
properly, 15 years ago,
Mm.
but 25 years ago,
Mm.
I did have a Rider-Waite tarot deck.
Yeah.
And I got it because I was hanging out with some friends and there was a deck of regular cards there. And I
Mm.
remember, I'm going to tell your fortune, I said to somebody. And I was just thinking about it. I was like, wow, this is kind of fun, actually. Four, what
Mm.
does four mean to me? What is a four? Diamonds is like money, and
Mm.
four is like stability or the elements or something. And I was just riffing on it, and then I was like, damn, I gotta get a deck of tarot cards. So
Mm.
naturally, the first grab is the Rider Waite. I
Yeah.
love Rider Waite, and I was on Rider Waite for years and years.
Yeah.
Um, Before I was a Mason and all that stuff, I was on Rider Waite for a long time, intuitively reading.
Mm.
I didn't know GD correspondences or
Mm.
continental levy correspondences. No Hebrew, none
Mm.
of that stuff. But years and years later, so about maybe maybe as much as 8 years ago now, I've been
Mm.
on strictly the Yoav Ben Dov Marseille.
Okay. Right. I've
Yeah, I
never
love
left
the
right
Marseille.
away. I've used right away for 30 plus years now. I think I was about.
You're a master. You don't need to.
Well, no, it's not. I'm not. That's the. I'm not even remotely
Well,
a
you got to
master.
know that. You got to know those cards. I mean,
Well, yeah, I know them, but I don't know them with, the GD correspondences front of mind. It's experiential.
oh,
Do you know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah.
And it's kind of always been that discipline where I haven't applied the systemic and structural rigor that I've applied to astrology. It's always been something that's far more intuitive. And first of all, visually, and then, of course, experientially. When I started doing one card a day, I started that like 20 years ago.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, put the card down, what's today's shape? What does it look like? And, oh, it looks like the Seven of Swords, or it looks like the world, or it looks like whatever.
Sure.
And that kind of sedimentarily builds up over time and experience of living through a day what
Yeah.
that particular card means. And it's just the background kind of, process that's running constantly where a particular day that's quite prominently justice shaped, for instance, your
Yeah.
experience on that day is going to flavor how you interpret justice for others when you're reading for others, etc. And it's something that's very slow, and it's kind of that was the process for me. I haven't put too much into the tarot. I've definitely nowhere near as much mental rigor as I've put into astrology, and for
Sure.
that reason, I've never left the Rider-Waite. I've never wanted to. The only
Yeah.
other deck that I consult is the Tarot of the Holy Light,
Hmm.
which is kind of Rider-Waite on steroids. It's
Oh, I
very,
see.
but again, it's more the visual aspect of it because it's kind of half art criticism, and you're sort of looking and using the visual triggers to kind of enter into the intuitive space.
Sure.
That's kind of where I'm at with tarot. So, I mean, I could overlay all the correspondences. I've read them before. I know them. They're there now, but
Yeah.
the bedrock's something else entirely. Yeah.
That's great. I mean, that sort of integration is what I'm hoping to one day achieve because I know the correspondences like
Mm.
back and front. I,
Yeah.
I could write words in tarot cards, in
Yeah.
Hebrew and translate it. But it's the intuitive stuff like where I started with
Mm.
that playing cards and just getting sort of an intuitive vision and creating a narrative and the
Mm.
sort of mythological accretions that attach or whatever your perspective is,
Yeah.
like and it's I hope to some get out someday get integrate that intellectual structure, that
Yes.
intellectual sort of architecture that I created, and kind of put some more intuitive wallpaper over it or something,
Mm.
and get more integrated, like it sounds like where you're at with it
Yeah,
one
well,
day.
I think sort of astrology beyond the Ogdoad is kind of almost an example of that, really, where, it's not so much papering one thing over another, but it's kind of allowing the space to exist post intellectually or meta intellectually or beyond the
Mm,
structures there that kind of are inherently and necessarily couched in space and time. And sitting
sure.
outside of that and allowing the intuition to come through, or the inspiration more so, to come
Mm,
through from that space beyond the Ogdoad. It's fascinating, and I think
yeah.
it feels to me, and I'm going to be reading this book for a year and a half at least, right? Just back to front, just keep
Yeah.
going through, and I think that's kind of where I felt the book ended, was with that possibility,
Yeah.
and again in that space that's almost post-lingual, it's hard to put words around it, and the fact that you have so clearly and so well throughout the entire book just speaks to the fact, like, I love this book, man. It's so good.
Thank you.
It's so
Thanks.
good.
That means a lot to me.
Oh, mate, no
Yeah.
problem at all. So, I mean, where can people find the book, and where can people find you, and what's the best places to find and follow what you're up to?
My website's probably the best one. Although I'm making some changes soon because I plan on starting a YouTube channel. I did buy an 18-inch ring light and I downloaded Movavi. So
Okay.
I'm gonna take a crack at it because I'm not doing my day job anymore.
Mm.
So I'm gonna throw myself more into the Substack, the YouTube, and writing some more. I'm working on another manuscript.
Ooh.
So the best place to go is my website, which is jamiepaullamb.com. It's my full name.com.
Mm-hmm.
Jamie is spelled Jaime, and there's going to be two L's because Paul Lamb,
Mm.
jamiepaullamb.com. Also, Substack at Jamie Paul Lamb, I think, is substack.com at Jamie Paul Lamb. And then the YouTube channel, it might be up by the time you air this, depending on how long it takes, is the Hidden Cosmos JPL, at the Hidden Cosmos JPL. So it's
Mm-hmm.
the title of it though is just the Hidden Cosmos with
Mm-hmm.
Jamie Paul Lamb. That's what I want to call the website or the YouTube channel because I was able to buy that domain. Do you believe it? I got the
What?
hiddencosmos.com.
No way. That's
Yeah.
great.
So, yeah, so I snatched that up and I was going with a couple other names, but I wanted this because it's like I could talk about anything.
Mm.
It doesn't have to be astrology. It doesn't have to be magic or alchemy. It's the hidden cosmos. I could talk about any sort of, um, numinous sort of stuff I wanted to, esoteric stuff, whatever. Right?
Mm.
I got a lot of interests,
Oh,
but
for sure. Yeah.
so I don't know if I'm going to have people on it. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet, but I
I think whatever you feel like, because if you've kind of taken that route already and it produces work like the Astrological Goetia, you should be keeping that up, absolutely. And
yeah.
we'll definitely we'll link to the website, we'll link to the Substack, and we'll also chuck the link into the YouTube channel, even just for people to sit there and wait with bated breath to see what you're up to next, mate.
That sounds good. I really appreciate you having me on, and it was such a pleasure to talk to you. I'm glad we finally got to meet.
Oh, pleasure's all mine, my friend, and thank you very much for coming on.